You're listening to Sparking Conversations on Culturally Responsive Childcare, the podcast where we get real about what culturally responsive practice actually looks like in the day-to-day of early learning. Hi, my name is Sarah Andrews. I'm a public health researcher with a background in child and youth programming.
And I'm Thea Louis. I'm a mom of two boys and an anthropologist. I grew up in Germany and now call Edmonton home.
We're part of the team that was behind the Spark Guide, a guide to culturally responsive early learning and childcare in Alberta, created by PolicyWise for Children and Families, together with early childhood practitioners and experts from across Alberta. We're recording from Treaty 6 territory and the North Saskatchewan River territory of the Métis Nation, a traditional traveling route and gathering place for many Indigenous people. Each episode, we sit down with educators and leaders who share their stories, their light bulb moments, and the small things that make a big difference for belonging and cultural learning. So whether you're brand new to the Spark Guide or looking for fresh inspiration, we're here to spark ideas you can bring into your program tomorrow.
When we approach children with gentleness, honesty, and courage, and when we have spaces that honor who they are, they grow up knowing that who they are is never too much, and who others are never too different.
For this episode, we will talk about how to have conversations with kids about difference. Children are really curious about what they see. They notice what's different about another kid in their group or an educator. Also, they're honest and they might not filter what they say out loud. And sometimes that can make another kid or educator feel uncomfortable. These are situations when educators feel the call to interject. But how? How do we engage with kids and curiosity about difference and the skills to do that in a way that's respectful and kind? How do you model intercultural skills?
We're more than happy to have Jasvinder Heran with us today to reflect on these situations and her experiences with them. Jasvinder has worked in childcare for over 35 years, owning and operating several childcare centers before coming to Intercultural Child and Family Center in 2013. She was recently honored to receive the Dr. Cheryl Brown Award of Distinction, recognizing commitment to quality early learning and care while supporting vulnerable families in the surrounding community. She has been involved in research and publishing on intercultural perspectives, on early childhood education and care, and on intercultural responsive pedagogies.
So welcome. It's really nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And you've been part of Spark previously and shared your experience around how to engage families. So how nice to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to be here and to be part of this conversation. This work is very close to my heart, and I'm honored to share this space with you.
Thanks so much. So we're asking all of our guests the same question to start with, and that is, what are the 2 or 3 words that you have front of mind when you think of culturally responsive childcare?
I think illumination, curiosity, and connection. I think the work opens pathways to think differently and more inclusively.
I love that you say opening pathways to think differently. So I'm curious to hear about your pathway. How did you start to become passionate about culturally responsive childcare, and how did you start to think differently about childcare?
I grew up as a newcomer child, navigating 2 worlds. The one inside my home, fixed with language, food, and stories, extended family, and the one outside, where those pieces of me did not always fit. I learned early what it's like to have parts of your identity celebrated, and while other parts kind of get dismissed. So when I entered childcare about 35 years ago, I carried these lived experience with me, and I saw children walk into programs with such beauty in who they were. And I watched how quickly they adapted, hid, or changed themselves to belong. And that broke my heart, and it pushed me. My passion for culturally responsive care did not come from research. It comes from witnessing children losing parts of themselves to fit into systems that were not built for them. It came from families who told me quietly, I hope my child doesn't forget where they come from. Over the years, I realized something powerful. When a child feels seen and truly seen, the whole room changes. Their confidence rises, their voices strengthen, and their relationships deepen. They walk differently and they shine differently. So that's why this work means so much. Culturally responsive childcare is a life commitment because I know what it is like to be a child trying to hold on to their identity. And I've never wanted a child to feel smaller because of who they are. So today, when I have lead educators walk into a room or meet a family for the first time, I carry my younger self with me. She reminds me every day to create the spaces you needed and build belonging you didn't always have. That is why I'm here, to make sure every child, every educator, and every family feels like they matter without having to leave part of themselves at the door.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing this. This is so powerful to hear how that experience of growing up has carried through your professional life. And it is such an interesting point to make how children adapt and hide parts of themselves. Educators play such an important role in strengthening kids' connection to culture. There's so many opportunities throughout the day to explore and celebrate difference and to give kids a sense that it's a strength and it's cultural wealth. And kids are so great in their curiosity. They ask all kinds of questions. I have two boys myself, and they ask me lots of questions, and they will just say out loud what they think. And if they notice a difference in other kids, they will just go and say it. So it's those situations that we want to talk about today, where maybe there's a situation where you hear something that's uncomfortable or that could even be hurtful. And then educators have the choice, do I just let it go, or do I use this as a teaching moment, as an opportunity to start a conversation about it? So how do you do that? How do you approach those situations?
I think for the most part, children are not afraid of differences as much as I think adults are. Children, like you had said, notice everything: skin color, hair textures, accents, food, clothing, abilities. And then they are natural observers. When they say something that makes another child or educator uncomfortable, it usually is not meant to be coming from harm. It's because they're trying to make sense of what they see at their age or stage. So for me, talking to children about differences begins with curiosity and not correction. It's if a child says something that lands with impact, what I do is I slow down and I get really close and I soften my voice. I might begin with, I wonder what made you say that. This keeps the moment open. Instead of shutting the child down, it tells them that you're safe to learn here. Then I connect it back to feelings and impact because children understand feelings deeply. I might say something like, when we talked about somebody's skin or language in a way that feels unkind, it can make their heart feel small. Let's think together about how other words felt. It's not about blame. It's about guidance. It's about empathy. And the conversations become even more meaningful when the environment itself is also doing the teaching. We make sure that children see themselves in the space: books, photos, art, dolls, dramatic play materials that reflect many skin tones, families, cultures, and ways of being. They also hear their languages in the space through song, greetings, bilingual labels, family recordings in first languages. And this starts as young as 12 months old. They feel their cultures woven in daily practice, not an extra part of the rhythm of the room. It's actually in everyday routines, practices, dialogues that they have. And because children see themselves reflected in those environments, they learn that differences are normal, they're valued, and they're safe. From that foundation, we model intercultural skills, naming difference without judgment, showing curiosity instead of assuming, acknowledging each person's story, learning how to repair with kindness when our words can cause harm, understanding that diversity is wealth and not something to be fixed or feared. When we approach children with gentleness, honesty, and courage, and when we have spaces that honor who they are, they grow up knowing that who they are is never too much and who others are never too different.
Thank you so much. That is so rich. A couple of things that really stood out to me is that slowing down and creating the safe space for learning. Even with me, when my kid says something that I think is not appropriate, I get a little bit nervous and I want to just fix it really quick. But you need to slow down and make them feel safe so they can actually hear and learn. And then also that the way you described intercultural skills, it's about curiosity, it's about seeing difference as wealth. And if something happened, which is also very normal, then what matters is repairing. And you said repairing with kindness. So these are some really amazing points you made. And we were wondering if you have a story, example of a situation where you heard a kid say something and the way you addressed it.
One moment that had stayed with me happened a few years ago in one of our preschool rooms. Two children were painting side by side, and one looked at the other's skin and said very innocently, "Why is your skin so dark and mine is clean?" As you can imagine, there was a pause in the room. Not because the child meant harm, but because of how those words landed. I could see the other child's body soften and almost fold inward. These moments matter. They tell us what children are noticing in their visible world. I moved in gently and sat down with both of them. Rather than correcting, I opened up space and I said, "I heard your words and I'm wondering what made you think about skin today." The first child held his hands up and said, "My hands are messy. Their hands are not messy." So in my mind, dark and clean had become tangled together through the sensory experience of painting. We explored it together, and I placed my hand next to theirs and said, "Our skin comes in many beautiful colors. Dark, light brown, tan, golden. They're all clean, and they're all ours." I turned to the quieter child, and I remember saying to her that, "How did that words make your body feel?" And they whispered, "A little sad." And so we sat with that sadness, and we talked about how words can make hearts feel small or big. And the first child, without hesitation, said, "I didn't want your heart to be sad." That moment became a learning invitation, not a moment for shame, but a reflection of empathy and repair. And in this is where I also think that environments happen, because it can either reinforce stereotypes or interpret them. I invited both children to explore our identity-rich literacy shelf, one that has intentionally filled books about showing diversity, skin tones, families, communities. And we pulled a book where a child's skin was described as a color of warm earth. And I said, "See, all colors are stories." At which time both children dived in their own imagination and descriptors of skin colors and went beyond the realm of colors into this imaginative world. So being immersed in that dialogue between these two children was quite fascinating. We went to the mirror together. And again, another important literacy tool for young children. And they looked at their reflection, where they held out their arms, compared shades, and named them from different skin tone paints. And we set and assembled moments exactly like what we said, things like, this is a beautiful brown, or this is a beautiful warm tan, and you're a golden brown. And children starting mixing paints even, and mixing skin colors and giggling as they created colors. The environment supported that narrative. Our books supported that narrative. The materials supported that narrative. The educators scaffolded alongside the materials and supported that narrative. All of it allowed that conversation to move from hurt to understanding and then to pride. This moment reminds me that children are always trying to understand the visible world around them. And when we can offer environments as well as educators that can scaffold and be curious and courageous, enrich identity representation with language and materials, they learn that differences are not something to fear, but something to honor. And also be curious about themselves.
I was wondering how that landed with your team of other educators, or whether you had a conversation about that as a team. What did you learn as a whole team from this situation?
So for me, we try and build that critical reflection. When something challenging happens or a comment is made about differences, a moment of conflict or misunderstanding, we encourage educators to pause and ask themselves, what is the child trying to really figure out? What might this reveal about their world, their body, their identity? That small pause changes everything, and it shifts us from judgment to curiosity, and from fixing to understanding. Being comfortable with the uncomfortable, and pairing up with another educator to support your questionings and wonderings as well, in and around a scenario, misunderstanding, a moment of conflict, and to hold that third space dialogue where you can input ideas and reflect on maybe a bias that you hold in and around a scenario. Talk to other educators that may be from the same culture, ways of being as that child or family, to gain more credible, authentic ways of being for that family, to support that space from judgment or shutting down to curiosity and fixing and understanding.
One of the things that really resonated with me as a mom was that holding that third space, or opening up that third space. I think that is probably what I'm always called to do, no matter what it is, between my two boys, where the tensions are higher or the voices are getting louder. It's just coming to that third space where there's no judgment, but curiosity and conversation can happen. Thanks so much for that. Yeah, I also really loved how you brought in how you can use kindness and those physical spaces and materials as a vehicle to have those conversations or engage with these more complex or even abstract concepts that even adults sometimes struggle with. So, love that sort of strategy that you've mentioned. I was wondering if you could share some other things that you have found most helpful for training those critical reflection muscles, both with kids and with your staff.
One of the things that we try and do is with staff, we normalize courageous conversations, and critical reflections with adults requires emotional safety. And we do this by holding team huddles focused on stories or provocation, ask educators to bring in a moment that stretched them, letting them explore the whys behind their reactions, using language like, what did this moment bring up for you as a person and as well as an educator? We can't forget that these educators that come through our doors also have stories that they're deeply connected to, and identities that they are also deeply connected to. We try and model and practice humility. I reflect out loud when I'm stretched. Because when I think leaders themselves reflect out loud, educators feel permission to be reflective too. You have to create a culture where people feel open enough, safe enough. I try and model curiosity, humility, cultural honesty in every interactions. We also create structure that makes reflective practice part of the rhythm. So colleagues have time to speak to each other, talk about what stories that might have a child be telling them, whose identity is being honored in moments, either in the environment or in an interaction, and whose identities that might be missing. It's really creating that space, even from orientation, either in an interview or family orientation, that we slow things down here, that we really want to know who you are, not at the surface level, but at a very deeper level, that we can really support you in a holistic and organic way through all those tensions that may come our way. And that's with our educators as well, too. So if we practice that from a leadership's perspective, that trickles down with the children itself.
Thanks for sharing that. I think it really resonates with me that you say, even from the interview, like your first interaction with them, building that safe space so that your staff and families can show up as their whole selves is really important for building that cultural responsiveness, and especially for staff. I was wondering, do you notice any little signs or signals that your staff are feeling safe and comfortable and modeling those intercultural skills that you've mentioned?
Definitely curiosity over correction, seeing educators slowing down and understanding what the child is trying to really figure out, or a family member or co-educator even. Supporting our environments as that co-teacher, when educators themselves will start bringing in items from their own cultures and share. Noticing differences and listening deeply, and actually being able to bring that to those small huddles that we have, and reflecting and providing them that permission to be human, and not knowing all the answers. And when we see educators saying that, then we know, let's sit down, let's look at this huddle, what stretched you, and let's have this conversation. There's a few of those pieces that we definitely see as educators are being transformed in that sense of space of that reflective practice and being comfortable in the pause.
I think it's really helpful for people to hear those signs and signals that what you're doing does matter and it is having an impact, and you can see it with the staff and also with the children. So thanks for sharing those more visible aspects of reflective practice and transformation. When it comes to talking about culture and things like that, a lot of educators have expressed challenges and how to being comfortable with the uncomfortable. I was wondering if you have any key piece of advice you would offer to someone new to culture responsive childcare about having those conversations with kids, to be okay with that uncomfortableness sometimes.
I mean, one piece of advice that I always offer, especially to educators who are new to culture responsive practice, is that you don't need to have the perfect words. You need to show up with curiosity and courage, first of all. Children don't remember the exact script that they used. What they remember is how you made them feel safe, seen, and valued. When a child sees something about differences that stretch you, take a breath and lean in. Instead of correcting, try wondering with them. Ask, what made you think about that? How do you think that made so-and-so feel? And remember that culture responsive conversations aren't grand speeches. They're tiny, everyday interactions where we show up for children. Differences are natural. The feelings matter. The words their words have impact. Every identity deserves dignity. Is learning together and not alone is another one. I think my encouragement would be you don't have to be an expert to be effective. You just have to be willing to be present, listen deeply, and learn alongside the children. If you come into work with an open heart and an open mind, the practice will grow in you. And over time, you will start to feel those tiny little shifts in your confidence and in your language and in the way children respond to you. That's where culture responsive practice really begins. It's not perfection, but it's presence.
What a great place to end on. I really love that piece of advice you started with about it isn't about being perfect. I think that is sometimes people get hung up on feeling like they need to know everything about all cultures. And it really isn't that. It is about, like you said, the presence. It's how you make them feel. It's about how you're reacting to situations that encourages that sense of belonging and inclusion. So really thank you for ending the podcast on that note. I think that is a perfect summary of what culture responsiveness looks like in action. Just thinking about our conversation here today, I think what really stood out to me is your emphasis of it's curiosity, not correction. And that's such an easy phrase to maybe have in the back of your head when you're thinking about these moments where you might panic and think, oh no, I don't know how to respond to this. You can just think, okay, what can we learn from this rather than how can I fix this? So that's what really stood out to me. Kate, what stood out for you?
A lot of things. So thank you so much. I think what's resonating still in my head is what you said about really getting to know the other person as a person. And that rings so true because that is the way to build relationships and to build safety and trust, where those conversations can happen and those courageous conversations can happen. And that trust transcends all kinds of differences. That is for culturally responsive care, but that also is the core for connecting across abilities, across ages, across different family constellations, or whatever it might be.
What I'd like to add is that I think at the heart of it all is a simple truth. When educators show up with presence, empathy, and curiosity, children learn that differences is not something to fear, but it is something to celebrate, and that learning stays with them long after they leave our classroom.
Thanks for listening. Check out the show notes for any links or resources that were mentioned in today's episode. And if you want to learn more about culture-responsive childcare, go to sparkguide.ca to download the Spark Guide, access free trainings, and find more resources. See you in the next episode.